What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tattoo Critiques. I'm Pony Lawson, here to look at your tattoos, and this week we're going to be jumping into anime and manga tattoos. If this isn't your first episode with us, you'll already know that my knowledge on anime and manga tattoos is pretty nil, so this should get pretty interesting. You're going to want to make sure to stick around to the very end of the video where I give you one of my favorite anime artists as well as my favorite tattoo of the week. So, if you're ready, Alright guys, before we get started, I want to give you a brief description on how anime and manga differ. Manga are graphic novels or comics, generally drawn in black and white, where anime is fully animated versions of that manga source. Of course, I had very little knowledge of that, and that's something I had to look up. Thanks, Google. But since we do get a lot of submissions of those manga anime styles, I figured it would be nice to do an episode dedicated to those. Now that we've cleared that up, let's get started. So first up is a Dragon Ball Z tattoo sent in from McGrath. And you mentioned you've never seen an episode of Dragon Ball Z either. High five! First impression, the line weight seems a little weak and the color just seems a bit patchy. It's not that bad, it's just my first overall impression. This tattoo doesn't necessarily need a thick line weight, but it does need a strong line weight. I just don't think there's enough thickness in that line weight to separate each part of this tattoo. From the arm to the shirt, around the boots, and around the lightning bolts, the outlines are just too similar. There's not enough variation happening. From what I've seen with anime style tattoos, there's generally 2 or more line weights just to give it some nice shape. And again, I'm not saying that you have to have this huge, bold outline around the entire thing. Just a little extra thickness in those parts that really need it. The areas that are sitting in front of other areas. For example, around the fist, his hair, and even his muscles. Those are just good focal points to keep those thicker outlines around. There's a lot going on in this tattoo, so doing so is just going to help you separate certain features from others. Especially that lightning that's coming around the body. That's a big part of this tattoo, so I do think that outline should be just a bit thicker than what it is now. The pieces coming off of him don't really look like movement, they kind of just look like cookie crumbs. It doesn't really have any sort of action feel to it. There's no lines for movement or flow, so those pieces are kind of just floating out there by themselves. The piece of yellow that doesn't have a full outline around it just looks like a piece of cheese hanging out of his pocket. And his boots kind of remind me of paper bags. I'm sorry to be so critical about this tattoo, but there are a few things that I want to bring to your attention. Especially for being a tattooer of 11 years, these are some things that you should have a little more down packed. I do think you've got your saturation down, especially when it comes to the hair, but if you look down to the pants, that's where things kind of get lost. You need to put shadows and highlights where they belong, not just haphazardly. I can tell you've got a little bit of black and a little bit of dark purple in those shadowy areas, but it just doesn't seem as controlled as it should be. It seems like you went at those pants without a plan. So again, with my knowledge of anime, I'm not certain, but I think this guy is supposed to have some yellow eyebrows where you just have outlines. Obviously, that'd be an easy fix. Just pointing that out. The lightning bolts could use some thicker, darker gray around the perimeter just to help it set off from the character. Right now they're just a little washy, especially with that white, and when it heals, it's just not going to be that strong. So overall, you've got some good things and you've got some bad things. I think you're honestly trying to stay too close to the reference when some things you need to tattooify. Even though the reference might have slightly thinner lines, you want to just thicken those outlines up just a bit to be able to hold those colors in there nice and strong. A tattoo isn't always an exact copy of art on paper. Sometimes things do need to change, and you need to be aware of what those changes need to be. So most importantly, I think some really good solid lines are going to take this tattoo to the next level. Also maybe a little extra brushing up on some shading. But thank you so much, Aaron, for sending that in and letting me take a peek. Alright, the next tattoo is sent in from Myke with another Dragon Ball Z tattoo. So this one's got some strength to it. It has some very nice outlines with some very bold color choices. The dark tan and the light tan work very well together. It kind of gives it this nice lighting effect, and the same could be said about the hair as well. It just has this nice smooth overall feel to it. The outlines aren't super thick, but they are thick enough to keep everything contained. I do like the muted tones that you have going on in the back of this tattoo, as it just helps it feel like a real anime. You started adding onto this tattoo as a pretty big cover-up, and to be honest, I can kind of tell, as there is a lot of empty space up top. I think the tattoo itself is done very well. Even the addition of the other character you have in there is done very well. It just looks like a lot of wasted space. And I know this is a cover-up, but I do feel like there was probably another way to approach that. You didn't send a picture of what was underneath it, so it could have been very dark. I just honestly have no idea, so I'm only going by what I see. And if that's supposed to be a planet on the right side, I think that needs some work, because that ring isn't really round at all. So overall, as far as the technical application goes, I think the artist nailed it, but composition-wise, I would give it maybe a 5, just because of all that wasted space up at the top. But thank you so much, Myke, for sending that in and letting me talk about it. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from Josh Zales. And Josh, you sent in this I have no idea tattoo. Pretty sure I saw her in Lord of the Rings. I have no idea who it is, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to judge the artwork. Okay, right off the bat, first impression, I think this photo's a bit blurry, and I'm assuming that's because you had a very low f-stop on your camera. This doesn't look like it was done post, but rather when you took the actual photo. Maybe try bumping up the f-stop to at least 3.2. That way it doesn't look so blurry around the entire tattoo, because most of the tattoo I can't even really see. And if this is post, knock it off. So as far as the details that I can see, the lines could be a bit stronger. They're not bad, but I do think they could use just a little bit more girth. I don't think any white is necessary in this tattoo, maybe in the center of the eye, but that's about it. You don't really need any in the bottom of the eye, the nose, or the mouth. There's some on the ear and collar as well, but again, it's not doing you any favors. It's probably just gonna fade away. The dark gray shading that's coming up in the hair could be just a bit smoother. Again, it's not bad. I just think you need a little bit more control when it comes to your shading. The shades in the bottom of the hair toward the back look a little bit cleaner and smoother, but again, it is hard to see as it is blurry. The light purple shades and the blue in the background and the pink shades you have in here look pretty solid. It's just those accent shades that I think you're having trouble with. As far as the color scheme goes, I do think you nailed it, but there are some technical things I think you need to work on. The detail in the shirt is cool, but again, I just wish I could see it clearer. The red on the face looks pretty solid, however, I do see just a little bit of skin tone showing through, so maybe try to butt that up closer next time. So overall, I think this is a pretty solid tattoo, from what I can see of it anyway. I just think you need a better photo, because you may not have meant it this way, but this is almost false advertising, in the way that it may mask faults you've had in this tattoo, because where it's blurry are the pieces that I want to look at and critique. We've seen a lot of tattoos that are shaped similar to this, and that's usually where people mess up on. The lines might not be symmetrical, they could be wonky, it could be a number of things, but it's just very hard to see through this blur. You did send in another photo, but the picture was taken so far away it's very hard to tell what's going on, because when you zoom in, the picture quality just kind of falls apart. Josh, I think this tattoo is very solid overall. I just wish the photo was a lot cleaner. But thank you so much for sending it in. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from Noe. And Noe, you sent in a kunai blade from Naruto. Right off the bat, I think this is one of the cooler Naruto tattoos we've seen on this series. I can tell that this tattoo has a little bit of your own flavor in it, and it's not just copied from a reference. The smoke and the little blue glow, I believe, are your own additions to this reference, and it's a great way to keep your eye traveling from one side to the other. Your eyes get carried from the bottom all the way to the top of the loop. That's something that a lot of artists strive for, is to keep your eye moving from one side to the other. So excellent job with that. Everything seems pretty symmetrical and clean for the most part. There are a couple hiccups here and there, but again, for the most part, you nailed it. You saved your highlights for just the right spots, and you didn't overdo it. Something that we saw in the other tattoos, and I think this one needs as well, is just a bit thicker outline around the entire perimeter. This outline is bold and strong, but I do think it could be a lot heavier. Right now, the smoke has a lot heavier outline than the blade itself, when in fact the blade is the most important part about this tattoo, so I do think that outline should be thicker than the smoke that's coming around it. I do like the thickness of the outlines in the smoke, but I do think the kunai needs to be at least that thick. It almost seems like maybe you used a 14 liner for the smoke and a 7 or a 9 for the blade itself. But overall, Noe, I think you did a bang up job, and thanks for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from M. And M, you sent in a character called Irojira Kirishima. Did I say that right? Ijiro Kirishima from My Hero Academia? It's about right. We're going with it. I don't want to have to say all that again. First impressions, this thing is pretty solid and pretty black. I like the combination of solid black and lines you have running through this entire tattoo. It keeps it from being stale. Initially, I'm not a huge fan of the strength of lines you have running through the red hair, as those lines seem to get a little lost in there. Other than that, I think the rest of this tattoo is pretty strong. So this appears to be a pretty accurate representation of this manga panel. You've got some nice, bold, thick, clean outlines around the lettering in this tattoo, and I think you've got a great technique when it comes to your outlines and contrast. But you need to watch out for those lines that are grouped close together and be mindful of how this is going to heal. As I mentioned earlier, you want to tattooify your reference. You want to set it up to be as good of a tattoo as possible, even if that means veering from your reference slightly. Although those lines in the background are pretty straight, I fear for them blurring together in the near future. Sometimes when we have a lot of grouped outlines like that together, it's very easy for them to blow out and become just one blob shape. Granted, it's not going to ruin this tattoo, but if that does happen, it's just not going to be as legible. I probably would have made those lines a little more spaced apart, so if they do blow out, you still have some space in between and it's not going to turn into a big black blob. And as for the details in the hair, I probably would have done just a little less, but made it more pronounced. But thank you so much, M, for sending that in. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the critiques this week. But before we go, I want to bring up my favorite tattoo of the episode, which was sent in from Noe with this Naruto tattoo. Noe, I think you've got a lot of great things going for you in this tattoo. The flow, the glow, and the color saturation is on point. There's just something about this tattoo that sets itself apart from the other tattoos we saw this week. I think that's because you brought your own elements to this tattoo and didn't rely so much on the reference. And sometimes we need to do that to our references to make them a better tattoo. So Noe, thank you so much for sending that in, and congratulations. Alright, now that the critiques are out of the way, I want to introduce somebody to you who I think does an exceptional job with the anime manga game. And that is Michela Bottin. Michela primarily works out of New York and excels in anime tattoos. Looking through her tattoos, you can tell there are no shortcuts. She puts in the work that's needed. Her color choices are bold. Her outlines are unmatched. If you're in the market for an anime tattoo, this is definitely one of the artists I would be scouting out. And she's genuinely one of the nicest people I've ever met. Now, I don't want to disrespect anybody who sent their tattoos in this week, but when you look at Michela's, there is no contest. She's on another planet. So make sure to head on over to her page, check out her work, and give her a follow. It's absolutely amazing. And let her know I sent you. Once again, thanks so much for sticking around, and if you'd like to see your tattoos critiqued here, you can do so by sending them to ponycritiques@gmail.com. Make sure to label whether or not you're an artist or collector, and maybe we'll see it on a future episode. See y'all next week.